morning. Welcome on this cold and snowy, blustery day out here on the East End at any rate. I'm so happy that you're joining us. This is a time when this country is reckoning with its past, and I'm about to introduce to you Sandy Brewster Walker, who's been reckoning with this country's past just about all her life. It's a privilege to have her with us this morning. She is an independent historian, a genealogist, a freelance writer, and a business owner. She's the chair of the Board of Trustees and the acting executive director of the Indigenous People Museum and Research Institute. And recently she was appointed the acting executive director and government affairs officer for the Montaukett Indians. She has served in President Bill Clinton's administration, and in 2017, Ms. Brewster Walker received the Press Club of Long Island's Media Award for her journalism. She's a most wonderful person, and I hope you'll engage with her freely during her talk as well as after. And we have an extra treat. We will be at the end of towards the end of the presentation. Southampton town historian Julie Green will be joining Sandy, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion afterwards. Thank you both for being here this morning, and thank you, Connor.
Good morning. I guess I start right now.
Yes.
Oh, okay. This is Sandy Brewster Walker. The only thing I'll add to what Jackie said is that I'm old, and I've been doing this for a number of years. What I'm going to do today is really kind of walk you through my research journey on this topic. You know, I kind of find things that are interesting, and then I research them to death, as Jackie would have probably have told you. We keep researching and researching them, and just to answer some questions about what's going on. And this whole thing about the men of color at the station actually started because Newsday in the Long Island Life section one Sunday, April 18th, had an article by Bill Blyer, a friend of mine. And in the article, he mentioned the men of color. So after reading the article, I called Bill and asked him, did he have a list of the names of the people? And he said no. And I think he suggested I call Julie. And I think I mentioned it to you or tried to reach you. And then the next step was, when I couldn't find a listing online or anything, I actually called the Coastguard Museum up in New London. And I spoke to a young man that gave me the email address for Scott Price, who's the chief historian for the Coastguard down in Washington. So I called him. And I wrote a long letter to him. And within a day, he answered me and started sending me pictures. Some of the pictures are on the internet and some weren't. He started sending me different listings. He put me in touch with Tim Doring. And I think that's how you pronounce his name. And we started corresponding. And then I found myself corresponding with other Coast Guard historians up and down the coast. And I started putting the information together about who the men of color were at the Tiana station. I'm sorry, I was just doing something, station. And I found myself, as I was putting it together, I didn't know that much about the Coast Guard. So I actually went back and started looking at the men of color in the U.S. Coast Guard. And I realized that it was the Revenue Cutter Service that started in 1790. It was renamed the Coast Guard, like I have on the slide, in 1915, when it merged with the Life Saving Service. And I had done some research on them on Long Island. And then the Lighthouse Service joined the Coast Guard in 1939. And in the process, I discovered and spent a couple of weeks on him, Captain William Haley. And he was one of the first US revenue cutters, men of color. And he actually sailed and did a lot of things up around Alaska, but he handled great mutinies and he fought off different, smugglers and stuff. And he was involved in a lot of the shipwrecks because up around Alaska, there were, in the late 1800s, there were a number of different whaling shipwrecks. And he brought medicine, like I mentioned here, and he would chase people who were slaughtering the marine wildlife. And then I discovered that he was actually experiencing a lot of racial discrimination and segregation because he was, at that time, one of the only men of color. But he went through this whole trauma. If you have a chance, you should read about him. And as he went on, they actually was almost like a scandal that was fabricated in some ways. And he actually lost, he had to go to court in Washington and stuff, but he lost his ship, being master of a ship, and he dies in 1904. But I want to tell you more about him, but that's not what I'm talking about today. But write down his name and read about him. Then the next thing I did, I stumbled across Pea Island, and I had heard about Pea Island, the life-saving station, and it was one of the few that were all men of color. And since then, I've found there might be 2 others. Now, Pea Island, the men of color there were a little different than we're going to find with the station on Long Island, because the Pea Island has been in existence so long, and the families actually, it's a kind of a tradition. Like this family, the Berry family, they have had 5 people in the Coastguard, and that's not really unusual. But that's another thing you should read about. And then I finally got back to Tiana station, and I started wondering, where were these men trained in 1942? And I found out that they were trained in Manhattan Beach, right near Coney Island. And this was a little unknown or little known racial experiment that began in 1942. So I started researching and going through the Brooklyn newspapers to find out about that. How did they recruit? What did they train the guys on? I found things like there was 174 segregated cottages. And I wasn't surprised at that, because I knew that even up in Chicago at a naval base, that was segregated. And the Navy was segregated, even the aircraft carriers were segregated. So it didn't surprise me that the training station at Manhattan Beach would be segregated. But they had about 350 recruits. And I haven't been able to find a picture of the station, but I'm wondering, of the building, I should say, but I was wondering whether the 3,500, I'm sorry, were men of color as well as white men. I haven't been able to find that out. But Company 24 was what they called then a Negro company. And you're going to notice something that I noticed as we go along, that most of the men that were Negro and in charge had passed the brown paper bag test. Maybe you don't know what that is, but during segregation, people would hire people if they could pass the test. They'd put a brown paper bag up next to their skin, and if they were lighter than the brown paper bag, they would get the job or get some advantages, whatever they were. But these are just some of the pictures and information about the Manhattan Center. They spent a lot of time also with, they went after recruiting famous athletes, musicians, not the everyday person that was being recruited for the war, for the early years of the war. I've also tried to research James O. Lewis, and I haven't been able to find out what happened to him or who he was exactly. The training instructors, the use of men of color, like I told you, they would only hire them if they could pass the brown paper bag test. And these guys were, most of them had bachelor's degrees, like Jones has a bachelor's of law in Chicago, from Chicago Law School. And I love these pictures. That's why I want to find one of the buildings. This was in the Boardwalk. And all of these pictures can be found either at the Coastguard website, or they can be found in the Library of Congress at their photo website. Now, Long Island about this time, so remember, this is the first 6 months, 6.5 months, 7 months of the World War II. And at the time, a German submarine had come close, and 4 Germans came ashore in Amagassett Beach, and 2 of them were Americans. And this kind of made, as I went through some other reports and news articles, it kind of set the stage for the men to start patrolling the beaches. I've also, in my journey, I keep reading the award diaries that you can find them online. I haven't been able to go down to Philadelphia or down to Washington archives to read anything, but I pull up the war journals to find out what else was going on. We know that they had the spies coming on shore in June, and what else was happening? So in August 1942, the barracks opens up. And the station unit well, it was kind of, it wasn't really, I was trying to think of how to put this. They opened up the Tiana lookout barracks, but it fell underneath Quag, and it fell later on underneath Shinnecock stations in November. And it really didn't seem like it was independent. It was almost like they didn't trust the men of color that they were bringing in to be able to run the station on their own. And I keep reading the diaries and reading the diaries more, because they kind of give a day-to-day record of the activities and the operation. And this is the station. And this information is all found on the US Coast Guard history page. And it just lists all the keepers and stuff. And when it was built in 1871, I'm sure when Julie comes on, she'll tell you a little bit more about that. Then I kept researching, and I found, well, also in Bill Blyer's article, he mentions Cecil Diesel. And I also found more information about him. I found out that his parents were born in the West Indian Islands. And I started tracing his father because I wanted to come to know a little bit more about him. And his mother, I can't see the top of my notes. One second. His father was born in Scotland, and his mother was born in the West Indian Islands. And I researched his father to find out more about him and went through all the census. And I researched his mother, and I have a whole file on both of them now, as well as the son. So, but I wanted to know more about how did he get to become the, the person in charge, commander in charge. And I found this article in the New York Age. In case you're not familiar with the New York Age newspaper, it was a Black newspaper. And if you wanted to find out anything that was happening in New York, you could check that, or you could check the Amsterdam News. And when I Googled his name in their archives, I found that in 1942, he was actually recruiting and in a recruiting office. So he was one of the people out there recruiting for the Manhattan Training Center. And he was recruiting all around the Bronx and New York. And this is some more about him. Some records show that he was born in 1916, but he was born April 21st, 1911, and he died in 1996. And he's buried on Long Island in Calverton. And I did find that he had some relatives living in New York City. Now, since this is my journey, I kind of do it a couple of different ways. I start a Looseleaf Book. I start file folders on a flash drive or on my portable drive for each individual. I still wanted to know who were these guys. So this is just my book. I just wanted to show you. I have pages for each one of the guys that I have found that were out on Long Island at the station. Well, this is one of the documents that Tim sent me. And you'll see all the guys' names, but I don't know the different codes. I didn't know, like what is OC3, what is S2C, and all that. So I actually did some research to find out what they all mean. And I started my own spreadsheet. And this is just some of the guys, these on this list. The guys on this list actually, did I just change the list? Yep. The guys on this list actually started at the station in 1942. And you'll see the three last columns on the sheet, they actually tell how they're ranked. And one is for 1942, 43, and then 44, because the war was over by then, or almost over. And if I close everyone's picture, you'll probably see a key on the right-hand side that tells you what SIC and QM3 or Quartermaster 3 and stuff is. I had to do some research, as I said, on that to find out what the guys were, what position they had. I'm going to go back to that. Now, this spreadsheet, this is only a portion of it. It has about 10 other columns. I've also have columns that will tell you when the guys were born, when they died, who their parents were, when their service date, enlistment date, and when they came out of the service. And some of them I've found that when they left the station, they went on a ship or they went to another station. And then but the men, most of the documents use the term Negro. I call them the men of color, because some of them, once you research and you find out, they weren't totally Black. You couldn't really call them a Negro.
Sandy, we had a question come in. So somebody was asking, how many men were you able to find information on in total?
136.
Okay. And was joining the Coast Guard a patriotic duty, or was it seen as a way to gain benefits for education and assimilation?
In 1942, it was because you were a patriot. Because, you know, in 1941, Pearl Harbor had been bombed. In 1942, going up to the summer, they were recruiting everyone they could. And then in June, I was born, but that's a sidebar.
Great. Okay, we can go back to the talk.
Yeah, and that's only some of the guys. You'll see, I haven't broken down by 1942 and 1943 and 1944. So, because I was trying to get an idea, like I said, this is my journey. I was trying to get an idea of what was going on and who they were. And in 1942, now we have Cecil coming to Long Island in August 1942. And then in September, you have a lot of things going on Long Island. And then there are a number of different stations that were supplied a dog. And all they did was give the station one dog. Some of the stations, like I know down in Atlantic City, they got a lot more dogs, but one dog to help patrol that quag area of the beach, which I thought was a little ridiculous, but that's just me. Also, my understanding from what I've read, Callie, the over on the left, he was the last white or European person to leave the station, and he leaves it in September 10th, 1942. I don't know if Julie, you found others that were at it, but he leaves then. And about that same month, in fact, the following week, a rubber raft comes on shore, and with a man with a rubber raft, a mystery man and a rifle was shot. And there was a lot in the newspaper at that time about that. So I actually tried to go through the notes and stuff, the war diary, to find out a little bit more about it, because some articles connected it to a yacht club, and there was a lot of confusion in the articles for me. And then 1943 comes around. I guess that between September and 1943, they're walking the beach with their one dog. And you have another group of men that come in. And some of the ones that are on the first list I showed you remain, some are transferred out. And you can see, I should have showed you on the other list. If you look over to the right, you'll see 1944, and you'll also see my key on the right-hand side. But if there's nothing in that space, that means that the guys has left that station. If some guys have stayed for another year, and some left. And they're the ones that I'm even trying to trace to find out where they went. And I think I just hit this again. And there we go. But most of the men at the station were not from Long Island. like I've seen the name Mayhew, and I thought it might be one of the Mayhews from Long Island that was native, but he wasn't. As I'm researching each one of these guys, I go into the Veterans Affairs death file online. And this is just a copy of some of the stuff I found. A lot of them will have the cause of death, but it also gives the guy's birthday and death date, and which is important to me. And sometimes there's about 6 or 8 more columns. And sometimes they'll tell if they're on a ship or something like that. So after getting his veterans paper, I wanted to know a little bit more about him. So Clarence, and I found out he was born in 1921 in Arkansas. He died in Wisconsin. He was listed as Black, and I traced his family, and they were. He entered the service in September 1942. I'm almost sure he was trained in Manhattan. And his father had been in World War I. It goes that tradition again, and the patriotism. And his father was in Louisiana. And then his grandfather had been in the Civil War. And I did not find this unusual, because I've had relatives that have fought in the American Revolution, the Civil War, the War of 1812, I forgot that one, and both World War I and World War II.
Sandy, we have some other questions that came in. First, are you going to be contacting any family members after this seminar for further information?
Not right after the seminar. I have a lot to do still on this. Maybe sometime next year I will. Or maybe I could tell Julie to contact them. But yeah, I have a lot of work still to do.
And then at any particular given time, about how many people were stationed at the Tiana life-saving station?
I haven't counted them. We could go back and look and see. But I think it's around 60, something like that. In 1943, I'm sorry, 42, it was 60 that I copied over, and not including the commander. And then in 1943, I think it was 62. And then in 44, it was just a handful.
Sounds good. All right, you can get back to the talk.
And then I also pulled out one to just show you another one, or another Veterans Affairs death record. And he was enlisted, it's all the same information, but he was enlisted in 1943 and he got out in 1946. But the station closed in 1944. So I was curious to know where he actually spent the rest of his time in the Coastguard. Now, one thing I should mention too, if you go back and you think about some of the pictures that I showed, you'll see there was the picture of the entertainer, Jones. They did a lot of that. You'll see they brought in a lot of sports figures, and there was a whole lot going on, but they weren't really being trained to fight a war. They were, I don't know whether they trusted people of color with guns or whatever, but there was a lot of, oh, you want to come in, we'll be nice to you type of thing going on. And you can walk the beach with your one dog. Okay, I also found, when I went through some newspapers and stuff, I found, wait a minute, let's see, it should be Britain. No. Oh, I know what it was. I was just trying to make the connection of why I put this in. I put it on the slide here because I had not heard of the Shinnecock Arms, and I wanted to see if anyone else has. I've tried Googling it. Do you know anything about it, Julie? The Shinnecock Arms. When you come on, maybe you
Yes,
could,
it's in Quogue,
it's in Quad. It's still
right?
there?
It's still standing. It's on Jessup Avenue.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it was actually run by a Native American, and it's either Enos or Arch. Right off the top of my head, I have forgotten.
That's fun.
But it was the Shinnecock Arms was the hotel that was kind of run for the chauffeurs and the people that worked for the summer residents.
Okay. Because John Pitts, who was stationed at this, Tiana station, he also spent time at the hotel. Now I understand why.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he would have been welcome at the Shinnecock Arms.
Yeah, and I did find it in the Amsterdam News, but when I Google Shinnecock Arms, I can't pull up anything. I even tried a couple of the newspapers.
There may have been another name for it as well.
Okay. So my journey will take me to research that now. 1944, the guys are still protecting the shore with the one dog. I don't know if by then I haven't been able to find out if they got another dog. Have you? And this would be this year you had fewer guys come in, but you still had a nice group of men there. I think that would answer the question I was asked earlier.
Sandy, sorry, I know you keep mentioning the dog. Did you find any mention of horses?
No.
Okay.
I've seen in some secondary sources, and I try not to use a lot of them.
Mhm.
I've seen things about horses,
Right.
but I just keep finding the dogs.
Right.
A dog.
Okay.
Or maybe when they were doing the daily logs and stuff, maybe they were fascinated by the dog like I was. Oops, sorry about that. I just waved my hand and there we go. Yeah, that's the spot I was in. Now, there are two guys I haven't been able to find any information on, so I put them at the bottom below the officer in charge. They also had a baseball team. I haven't found out who they played, but I found the picture, I've seen the picture of the baseball team. And I was wondering if any of the gentlemen are part of the were part of the Negro League. So I like I said before, I have a lot of research still to do. Then also they had a quartet that played, you find this type of ad in both the New York Age and the Amsterdam News. They played all over the city and on Long Island. But I haven't found out who actually was in the league. I mean, who actually was in the quartet. And since it's an AME Zion Church, I know one of the things I questioned, did they actually play at the Sag Harbor AME Church? And then it's Chow Time. And I like this picture. Look how young the guys are. When I find their birth dates and and figure out their age when they went in. Most of them were in their early 20s. I'm also curious about whether or not any of them remained on Long Island after the service, because they might have met a young lady. And these are some of the log books and war diaries that I go through, try to go through the primary sources. A lot of them have been declassified. And if you scroll down, you'll see April 8th, you'll see information about the Tiana, they call it lifeboat station, but this is April 1943. And there's tons of these online for those years, but you have to kind of go through. Most of them have quite a few pages, and you have to go through. Some of them are kind of alphabetized or whatever, or region within the region. And this one is under Long Island section. But I want to piece together what was going on in their lives while they were there. And I just pulled these out of a war diary. But there seemed to be a lot of activity going on, as we've all studied probably in school about the submarines and stuff that were off the coast of Long Island during the war. And then in the summer of 1944, it was discontinued, the patrols. And the property was abandoned in 1946. But I want to know, and that's what one of my questions is, where did the guys go? I found some of them, like I mentioned, they were actually transferred to ships or other stations, but I'm trying to find out where the 136 that I've found, where they've gone, where they went, I'm sorry. And after the war, Cecil pops up in the Amsterdam News. He's hanging out in Sag Harbor. And he's married, he's hanging out there. And I think he might be at, I can't think of the name of the resort or the house, but I know that a relative of Charles Certain owned it. And I could probably pull out another book and find out the name or look it up if anyone's curious. Also, he was named Chief of Vocational Guidance and Occupational Testing for Mayor Wagner. So we know he was right here in New York doing his thing. But he was hired at $14,500, which was a lot of money back then. Then you find him again, and he is regional director of in New York for the Federal Office of Economic Opportunity. And that's just a little bit of my research. Hope I haven't bored you too much, but I'm really digging into it and trying to find out who were these guys. I want to put together their lives. And Julie can tell you a little bit more about what's happening to the building today. I want to know about the guys, though. Julie?
Sandy, thank you so much. It's incredible the amount of research that you've done. And I know it's kind of difficult because we only have the census records up until 1940 because of privacy laws. to see where these men, we could pop these names into the census records and find out what happened to them and where they went. Somebody had mentioned about patriotic, or did they enter service for educational benefits. The GI Bill was actually passed in 1944. So most of the men that went into service, either it was patriotic. A lot of men, my husband's grandfather, for one, joined immediately after the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941. And then, for a lot of people and a lot of men, it was a job. We were coming out of the Depression, in the late 30s, early 40s. So people were looking for work. So this was good, steady work for a lot of men. Not just specifically to the men of color that's served here at the station. But it's an incredible part of the history of the building. This building, which is town-owned, was built in 1912. It's the second life-saving station here in East Quogue, Hampton Bays area, the Tiana area. And if you can see in this picture, which is great that Sandy's got here, the building to the left, that little gray building, that's actually the first life-saving station that was built in probably the 1870s. And it has been altered over time. It was also a nightclub, like the Tiana station was a nightclub, which was Neptune's for a very long period of time. So the town has this building. We've restored it. We've even restored further. We're further along than this photo shows. The exterior has been completed, and we are now working on the interior. Of course, we were waylaid and delayed a bit by the pandemic, but we are working currently on the interior restoration process in hopes that we can have a museum of sorts here at the life-saving station that will honor the men and the heritage of the men that serve there. As Sandy had mentioned, the life-saving service was the first that was put by the United States government. The stations were dotted all along the East Coast. And then in 1912, a few of these stations, this style is the Lorraine architectural style. It was designed by Victor Mendenleff, and it is named for a station that actually is no longer standing in Ohio, in Lorain, Ohio, on I believe it's on one of the Great Lakes, and it was named for that style. So there are a few of them. Our sister station is in Quogue, which is a private residence. That station's beautiful. The family that owns the house has kept it almost exactly as is. So we have a building that we can model from the interior about what it would look like when these gentlemen served in the 30s, in the 1940s, in the early 1940s during World War II. So there's lots of history about this building. We hope to bring all of that to light, especially what Sandy's been speaking about. It's a very important part of our history. So this station will be Southampton town's kind of, homage to all of the lifesavers in the town of Southampton, all the way up through it's being decommissioned in 46 rather. So we had Prohibition that was going on in the life. This Coastguard were dealing with Prohibition issues. There was a surfman who lived there, who worked there, and lived. Leslie Randall, he was actually shot by rum runners. They got into a shootout with Quogue and Tiana Life's Coastguard men. So we'll be bringing all of these things to light when we finish our renovation. And we're currently working on stewardship and that type of thing. So sorry, all off the top of my head at the moment. But also, which is interesting, I know that Sandy mentioned Kelly Fulcher. He was actually at the Shinnecock station. So there was, which we now know as the main Coast Guard station at Ponquag was built in 1940. That was built because the Shinnecock station that was down on the beach was destroyed in the hurricane of 1938. So all of those station men went to the Tiana station and lived there and worked there while the new station was being built at Ponquag, which is standing today.
He was the last one to
Yes,
go over.
he was.
But I wanted to mention too, that the men of color that were at the station between 1942 and 44, they had a different experience. They probably joined, like I said, some it was tradition, and some probably joined, like you mentioned, because they were coming out of the Depression.
Mm.
But at the end of the war, they didn't get the same type of benefits.
I'm
They
sure not.
in Levittown, they could buy them in certain areas. Even their experience, if they had joined the Navy and were on an aircraft carrier, most of the men were either cooks or with stewards, or they lived below deck, below the below deck, and very few worked up on the deck of an aircraft carrier. You know, they had a whole different experience.
Right. And I'm sure the experience beforehand while they were in service and afterward was completely different than any of the white servicemen, for sure.
I want to find out. I'd love to get some of the pictures of the guys. That goes back to the question about, will I contact some families once I get enough information?
So I have a question, back to your motivation for doing this research about how different their experience was, and your very astute question, was it being used as a sort of a holding place for lack of trust, or for maybe avoiding conflict or racial, trouble with other Coast Guard men? I don't know. I don't know any of the answers to any of this, but I have two questions. One is, were any of the Tiana Coast Guard men of color deployed on ships at any point during the war? And also, were they responsible, for any of the I don't know if it was action, but the radio research to try to intercept submarines in the Atlantic? Because you're right, they came very close to Montauk and Amagansett. There was activity in the Atlantic Ocean separately from the Pacific theater of World War II. And I'm wondering, did any of these men participate in any other way?
My answer is I really don't know, but I haven't seen any evidence that they have participated in any other way except patrolling the beach with the one dog. But perhaps there were horses or something. I just haven't found them. But I think it was more of a holding, but I can't prove it yet. That's why I said I have a lot more research to do.
So yeah, I hope there are some other researchers on who will help you if any of us find anything.
Yes, and Tim is going to help me also. He has been helping me, but he's away for, I think, a couple of weeks. And he's going to go into the Philadelphia National Archives, if they stay open during this pandemic, don't close again, and see what information he can find too about it. But I want to know actually what they were doing, because we all know that during World War II, men of color were treated totally different in the war.
Right. I've actually had records brought up from Philadelphia to New York City, to the National Archive building there in the city. And unfortunately, they have not reopened yet. So makes it easy, just a quick trip into the city to do research.
Yeah. I like Washington myself.
I would love to get down to Washington, but it's a little bit longer of a trip.
Are there any other questions?
I'll say, yeah, we do have some questions that came in from the guests. One person whose name is Cecil Forster said that they wanted me to inform you that they have pictures of their father in uniform.
Oh, fantastic.
Fantastic. Um, Tell them to contact me.
Yes, yeah. So I'm going to put my
You can
email
send them
address.
my number and my phone number and email address.
Yeah, so I have their contact information from signing up for the talks. I'll make sure to forward that to you so you guys can connect.
I was curious, are they the son or the grandson?
Well, they said their father in uniform, so they might just be the son of.
Yeah, because he died in 1996.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, not sure, but hopefully we'll find out soon.
Oh, you will. If you
Yeah.
contact me.
And then we had somebody else saying he did confirm that they are the son of Cecil.
Oh, tell him to call me now.
Yeah, yeah, I'll make sure to get you two connected. And then somebody else was saying that when this building that we have on screen here was Neptune's, apparently the musical group that was the house band was called the Rascals. Do you know about them or have any information about them?
I don't. Julie?
I don't. No, sorry.
Unfortunately not, but
I'd like to say I was too young to go to Neptune's, but I'm not, and I had never been there. So and I came onto this project as the town historian a little bit later in the process. So I'm researching, and again, Sandy's done some incredible work. And anybody else that's listening that has artifacts or anything that can help us tell the story clearer would be great to be in touch.
Yeah, I believe everybody that's on this talk should have my email address, probably the one that sent the Zoom information. So if you do have anything, shoot me an email and I'll connect you along down the pipeline to everybody. And then another question that we have here, are some of the sites that you were mentioning during today's talk available for visiting by the general public, or are some of them no longer around?
I don't know about the Manhattan, but I can research that when you can give them my email address to find out if you can visit. Julie, when is your building opening?
We hope that 2022 will be good to us, and we will get the interior of this. We're starting now. Hopefully we can go. I can't give an exact timeline, but I'd love to see it open in the next year or so. It's quite a commanding building, and all the different ideas for the building are being discussed. So, but soon.
Soon's better than never.
Right. And I also wanted to mention that we recently, the town and the CPF brought a very large anchor that belonged to a shipwreck, so that we can kind of really understand, because it's something that we don't often think about, life-saving and what went into the service, this type of service for men, and especially during World War II. It was a really trying time, especially along the coastline. We've mentioned the Amagansett, saboteurs landing in Amagansett, the Nazis landing there. So it's really, really important. So I'm hoping sooner rather than later that will be open.
That's great to hear. I don't think we have any other questions in here. If anybody does have one, please feel free to send it in. But I want to thank Julie Green, the Southampton town historian, for being here today and helping with today's talk. Jackie Marks from the Amagansett Free Library for helping to put this talk together. And also, most importantly, Sandy for providing all the information for today. This was a really informative, great talk for all the research that you've been doing. And I can't wait to see what at the end all your research really has to show for these men and the lives that they might have had, and maybe hopefully also get to visit the life-saving station one of these days.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Oh, Julie?
Yeah, and I wanted to just thank, I don't know if he's on, but Scott Price for all of his help and get me some of the information that's gotten me hooked on this. And I know, and Tim, that both with the Coastguard, or Tim was with Coastguard. but Scott is the chief historian.
Well, yeah, this was great. Oh, let's see. We have. Oh, not a question, but someone just saying, fantastic talk. Thanks for all the information, all that stuff. And yeah, this was great. Again, thank you. And we will hopefully catch you all again in the future. Thanks for joining us this
Thank
morning.
you. My journey continues.
Thanks again, Sandy.